I'm building a plugin using C++, and I wanted to show where I'm at so far. Currently, I only have a waveform selector and an ADSR envelope, but let's take a listen and then I'll explain. So that's it for now. Hopefully I'll have more to show in the future. And next I'll be explaining the code in C++ and the JUCE framework. So taking a look at the code here, I started off by inheriting from synthesizer sound, which is a JUCE class, and synthesizer voice, and created these custom classes to kind of um, encapsulate the functionality that's acting on data and separate that from the UI. And also, our plugin processor is where a lot of the sort of bulk of the data processing is going to be happening, and I wanted to keep it fairly clean. So we have synthesizer sound and synth voice here. They're using some other custom classes that are our oscillator data and our ADSR data, which we'll get into in a moment. But essentially, the synthesizer voice, synth voice, is handling a lot of the code that we would need to duplicate in plugin processor, and so synth voice, is setting the oscillator frequency using our MIDI note number. So here, I guess we can take a look at oscillator data. So here we have a class that's inheriting from the oscillator class, and we are overriding some of the functions. So one of them here, prepare to play, I believe we're using it here. Now it's only one line of code difference, but it's good to isolate things that are functionally separate. And so if you ever have to debug it, you kind of have a little bit more logical separation going on. So in the oscillator data class, we're also allowing here, we have a switch statement which allows us to pick a waveform, and these functions are on JUICE's website if you want to take a look for sine, saw, and square waves. And then we have a function here to set the frequency depending on the MIDI note that you're playing on your keyboard, and translate that into hertz. So that sets the current frequency. And then we are calling process on passing in an audio block. I believe here is where we're calling that. And then ADSR data is fairly simple. It's just updating the data if the user changes the value using our sliders. This just updates. So this is also inheriting from JUICE's base class, ADSR class. So and similarly here in our synth voice, we are calling that here. So this is a JUICE method. So here we go. This is what we're calling it. So now that we've looked at synth voice, we can move into kind of the brains, which is our plug-in processor. The first thing it does is it adds multiple voices here, which allows for a polyphonic synth, and then add just go to our header file. We have a synthesizer, which is where all of our sound processing is going to be applied in context to this synth. And then we have our audio processor value tree state, which is what kind of allows us to create our UI, kind of bind our UI and our and the values that are going to apply to these parameters. So this is all mostly just boilerplate JUCE. In prepare to play, we have our synth voice here, calling our synth voice prepare to play, which sets up the ADSR and oscillators, sample rate, and sets the gain for for our volume. Then we have our process block, which is where we use our audio processor value tree state to get the value of get the value using this key ID. So down here, we've set up these key IDs for our audio parameters. And here, during our process block, we are getting that value and we're updating it. So here from our synth voice, we're updating the ADSR, and here we're setting the waveform. So those functions reside back in our oscillator data and ADSR data classes. And then we call render next block. So that's kind of the main logic behind it and how our data is kind of separated. The rest of the functionality is just UI, which is not super interesting. We have separated the ADSR and oscillators into their own components, and that just allowed me to kind of abstract some of the code that's just doing setting the color and adding these adding labels and adding the sizes and whatnot. I was able to put that into these classes that just handle the components themselves. And then in plugin editor, all I have to do is add the components and make them visible. And this is actually quite important here. This piece of this constructor is what's allowing me to have access to values from the data class, such as the audio processor value tree state in plugin processor. I need to be able to access the value of, let's say, the ADSR or the oscillator and update that in the UI. So in the constructor here, I'm passing these values into the components. And so that allows the UI to update and have access to data and make sure that when the user does something, the UI actually updates the correct piece of data. So I think that's everything for now. I'm hoping to add some effects like distortion or reverb. I'm also hoping that I'll be able to add some filtering and some cool effects. So for now, let me know if you see anything glaringly wrong or with what I'm doing, or if there's any suggestions out there to improve. Yeah, thanks.